Windows Server 2019 System Administration. Welcome back everybody. I'm Prakash Pradhan, your trainer for this entire series. As we discussed previously, this is the part 2 of our failover cluster configuration. In our part 1, we have discussed all the theoretical portion, all the prerequisites that you are supposed to know or that you are supposed to set before we just continue in order to just say for the configuration of your failover cluster. So as we have discussed in our previous video or the part 1, so I would like to suggest you all, those who are watching this video, if you have missed the previous part of this video, please go through that. Otherwise you may not be able to understand whatever configuration what we planned last time. Now as we discuss, see, in our network environment, this is going to be a one domain controller, and those two operating systems are Server 2019, just a member server. Now we have used the IP 192.168.50 in a range of your class C. Okay, it's a private, everybody knows that. Now apart from having an IP address in order to set the communication with the domain controller, we do have another two more IP in the different range, if you notice over here. So what is the purpose of this IP address is that just to make sure that the nodes in your failover cluster can communicate with each other. This is for checking some sort of your heartbeat, so that when the one server goes down, another server will look after it immediately. That is the concept of the failover cluster that we have already discussed in our previous video. So I don't want to waste your time because this video is going to be a bit lengthy, I think. So you sit back, relax and enjoy this video. Now in between the configuration of this failover cluster, I would like to know all that apart from having all these types of IP, we are going to have two more IPs. Number one is for the cluster IP, and number two is the IP address that is going to be created virtually, and the clients are going to use that IP actually in order to access your file. So that is the basic requirement actually. Now without wasting your time, let's start the failover cluster configuration in this scenario that we have set last time. Okay, now I'm going to take you to a domain controller. As you remember, in a domain controller, first we need to create a Iscsi target, because from the Iscsi target only the clients are going to use the Iscsi Initiator. So that's why I need to create one Iscsi target over here, and don't forget the Iscsi target is not enabled by default in Windows Server 2019 operating system. You'll have to add that one. Okay, and I do believe since you all might be working as a system administrator or a system engineer or any IT sector, you should know from where you are going to add it. Okay, from the manage, everybody knows that. So in order to make this video a bit smaller, in a time I mean to say that, so I have pre-installed this your Iscsi target. So let's continue after installing the Iscsi target. Now I'm going to create over here the disk space for three purposes. Number one, as we discussed, for your quorum. Number two, for your file. Number three, for the log file. Okay, now let's go to the same drive. I don't want to waste your time, so let's create one folder, and I'm going to write, let's write this one, quorum. Okay, quorum already exists. Okay, let's use this one only, no problem. We'll select a folder, next one, and let's say first quorum. So this is going to create one virtual disk, that we already know that, and I'm going to use only 1 GB. Since we are in a lab environment, having a 1 GB is, I guess it's more than enough, and I've also selected over here dynamically expanding. So now of course it's a new Iscsi target, we know that. Now let's give a name. Okay, now let's say my target, anything you want. Okay, avoid the space, we know that. And now this is the main screen that you need to understand. See, we are going to create the Iscsi target. The Iscsi target without Iscsi Initiator is useless, no purpose. So that's why you need to make sure who are the client who are going to use this Iscsi target. That means you need to select the Iscsi Initiator. Now in our environment, we are going to use IP address rather than any other type that's been listed over here. Okay, so let's go to the IP address of that one member server. 50.51 is the one member server. Okay, let's gonna add it. This is the one member server who is going to take a part in this failover cluster. Now I'm going to add another one also, because we are going to have two servers in a failover cluster who is going to work as a partner, that we have already discussed. Now 192.168.50.52 is the next IP address that is going to use this one from the initiator point of view. So these are the two members now who are going to be a part of our failover cluster. Next, and of course we are not going to worry about this authentication. Okay, now since we are in a lab environment, we'll create it. Now this one is only for the quorum. Now you need to do two more things. One is for your file and second one is your database. Actually it's for the SQL. Even if you have you can install it, otherwise you can simply leave it. Okay, if it takes a time over here, since I have so many virtual machines in my environment, otherwise I'm gonna pause this video and I'm gonna continue. And it's good news, and it did quite a bit faster. Now this was only for the quorum. Of course we do have to create others as well. Okay, now let's go to tasks and create a new Iscsi now. So I'm going to use the same location, I guess, in the root of the C drive. So let's create another one, this one, let's say for the file. Okay, now I'm going to select this one. Okay, let's go to file. That's why I told you, if you have not gone through the previous video, please go through that. Now let's say for file. Okay, now it's going to give us the same dialog afterwards, because see, if I do not provide the space, I mean to say that one. Okay, now Iscsi, it's gonna pick up the same. Okay, because we are going to do this one only. Done. And one more. Okay, it's gonna do quickly. And last one. Okay, that was for the file, and this one is for the database. So let's take it for this one. I'm gonna write let's say database. Okay, but to be honest, if you do not have any kind of this SQL and all, you can simply skip this one and have only two spaces actually for database. Okay, so I'm gonna give it next 1 GB, not more than that. Okay, it's gonna pick up. Okay, this is the same, so that's why. So it's done. Okay, now same server, that means a member are going to use this, so that's why we went for the shortcut. Okay, done. It's done now. Okay, now Iscsi target, we have set the 3 targets. Now the next one is that you need to have Iscsi Initiator. That means 2 member servers. If you notice, these are the 2 member servers who is going to take a part. So first we are going to install, that means we are going to take Iscsi Initiator from these 2 servers, okay, and extract those hard disk space that's been assigned by your that means your Iscsi target. So I'm going to go first in my member 1. Now in order to see the communication with the member 1, I would like to show you the IP address. So one IP address is in the range of 50. Of course, this is our requirement, but if you have noticed over here, we are going to use another range of IP also, that is in a different network. So let's do that first. Okay, so I wanted to see you practically, so that's why I will not assign the next IP address over here. So let's assign the IP over here for the next network in order to check the heartbeat actually that we have already discussed. So 192.168.51.51 is the first one. Of course, we are not going to use any kind of DNS gateway, anything, because this is simply for checking your heartbeat, so that when the one server goes down, another one will wake up. So similarly, let's go to member 2. Where is the member 2? Here, it's my member 2. In a member 2 also, I have assigned only one IP in the range of your network. So we need to assign a heartbeat IP over here. So let's use the IP, this one 192.168.51.52. Okay, that was the 51, so we're going to use it 52, and no gateway, no DNS, nothing. Okay, now again we'll go back to the member 1 because we're doing the configuration out there only. So let's try it, that whether they can communicate with each other or not. Okay, now if you have a look to your IP address, okay, finger goes faster sometimes. So let's see now, let's try to communicate with this one. So 50.51 is myself. So let's communicate to the 52. Is it doing? No, otherwise we'll have to check the firewall. Okay, 192.168.50.52. No problem. We'll check the firewall otherwise. And let's check it another one IP. We might have misconfigured also. Okay, 50 dot let's say 51. It's myself. It's myself. Okay, so it's answering. So let's go to member 2 and check the firewall. See, you'll have to check this also. So this is a member 1. So let me check the firewall. It's good to find this kind of errors so that you get to know what are the possible dependencies that you are supposed to know. See, I told you the firewall is on, so that's why it was creating a problem. So since you are in a lab environment, and we don't hesitate to turn off the firewall, but I do suggest you not to do this. Okay, but since it's a lab environment and we like to see the configuration of this failover cluster, so that's why I did this. Now definitely it's gonna ping it, trust me. See, I told you, it's done. Now the next one, heartbeat IP also I need to check it. So that is the 51 dot, I guess that is the 52. Okay, congratulations, it's done. So now I need to use the hard disk from here. That means I need to initiate my Iscsi Initiator in the member server 1. Okay, now for that, let's go to Iscsi Initiator. And this Iscsi Initiator in server operating system is by default installed. You don't have to install it. But only in a case if you like to set the Iscsi target, in that case, you'll have to add it. Okay. So let's go to Iscsi Initiator. It's taking time, no problem. As I told you, I've got so many virtual machines over here, so it takes time. Okay, service run. Okay, Mike. Okay, we know that it's gonna initiate it for us. Let's wait. It's gonna work. Okay. Now here, you all know. I do believe that you have already played with this, or work. I mean to say, work with the Iscsi target. Now let's set the IP of your Iscsi target, because this one is the member. That means that is Iscsi Initiator. So 196.168.168.50.50 is your Iscsi target. So let's go to the quick connect. Congratulations, it's connected. And don't forget, we have 3 volumes over here that you need to list it over here. Auto configure, it's going to bring it all. Congratulations, it's done. Now the next thing, if I go to my computer over here, those 3 drives will not be displayed over here. That means we often say nowadays it's a volume. Those 3 volumes are not listed. Why? It's not initiated. Now in order to do that, let's go to disk management. It's a shortcut command, and I do believe that you all know that. So we'll be going to disk management. It takes time, let it come. Okay, see, it's not initialized, it's not online only. So we'll bring it into line. That means online. All the disks, will bring it online. Okay, now we need to initialize. Okay, all the disks we are going to do at the same time. And we are also going to create a partition as well, because see, it's unallocated. We are going to create a simple volume as a primary. So let's give any letter that you find, the first one. So now next one, it's saying to format it most probably. Okay, we don't mind to do that. Thanks to Microsoft, it does automatically, or it pop up this warning. That means a message, I mean to say that. So let's do it, finish it. Okay, this one also would like to format. Definitely like to do, I would like to do that, I mean to say that. Now, okay, done. Now the last one. Okay, let's format it. Let's create the volume, and obviously it's gonna ask you to format this one also. Everybody knows this. Okay, it's a smallest thing nowadays. Okay, format disks. Okay, start. Okay, done. Now if I go to my computer over here, okay, you need to see all those 3 volumes listed over here. It has to be listed, otherwise we missed. Congratulations, it's done. Now the same thing has to be done from the member server 2 also. See, over here also Iscsi Initiator has to be initialized in order to use the space from the Iscsi target for your failover clustering. Now let's go to member 2. Of course, it can ping, it can easily communicate. So I'd like to show you that practically over here. Let's ping it to the next network in order to check the heartbeat. 192.168.51.51 is the IP address of your heartbeat for the member server 1. Okay. Now it's not able to reply over here. That means you should have understood by this time the firewall in your member server 1 is also still on. So let's turn off that one. Most probably it is on. See, I told you. So now turn off this one. I repeat again, this is only for the lab environment. I would like to just show you how to configure the failover cluster. So that's why I'm turning off the firewall. Otherwise, I do not suggest anyone to turn off the firewall. Okay, it's about the security. Now, let's ping it. Definitely it's going to reply. Congratulations, it's done. Now, the next work is that we need to use the Iscsi Initiator. Of course, we need to extract the space out of your Iscsi target. So that's why I need to have Iscsi Initiator over here. And as I've already mentioned, in server operating system, it is by default installed. Only the initiator, not target. So let it come. The things are going on smoothly. I do believe we are not going to find any kind of error, because this video is going to be a bit lengthy. Because I want you all to experience and see practically how the failover cluster is set, and I'd like to show you practically how when one cluster member goes down, another one will take over immediately, and the data loss chance is 0 actually, because we're not going to use this Iscsi member or the Iscsi Initiator server in order to store the data, because your data is stored in a Iscsi target. That is the only concept over here. So it will find it, don't worry, it's taking time. Let's refresh it. Okay, now we are gonna run it, the same thing. Otherwise we'll be doing from here also. The thing is same. Iscsi Initiator is here. Okay, let's not wait. Of course Microsoft will do it automatically for us, don't worry. Now it's going to bring it. Okay, Iscsi Initiator is over here. Now we are going to write the IP of the target. 50.50 should connect without any error. We are confident on that. Volume automatically 3 volumes. Okay, congratulations, it's done. So nearly I click the cancel. Okay, now the same thing you'll have to do over here also. Okay, because see, if I go to my computer over here, those logical volumes will not be displayed over here until unless you initialize and create the partition and format it. Obviously, see, it's not gonna display over here. So that's why let's go to disk management. Sometimes I do forget the command, you know, my finger goes sometimes slow, sometimes fast. Okay, now we'll bring it into online. We are 100% sure the disk is over here now. Okay, congratulations, it's already here. So bring it online. Okay, one is done. Bring it online. And the third one is also, we'll have to bring it online. I'd like to remind you again, the first volume was for your quorum, second volume was for your data or as a file server, and the third one was for your log, nothing else. See, these three are there. And you need to understand one more thing over here. When we complete only the configuration portion of this failover cluster, I repeat my statement, when we complete the configuration of failover cluster, only one node is going to act as your live node. That means it will show you in the nodes, both the nodes are up, but only from the one server you can access the data. Okay, because that is the concept of the failover cluster. Okay, one will be active, one will be the passive. And I'd like to tell you now only, when the failover cluster is completely set up done, you'll find that only in one node the disk will be visible. Whoever is not taking part, that will not be visible. Okay, so let's start the installation of your Iscsi. That means failover cluster in a member, any member. See, if you want to configure or if you would like to start a configuration of this failover cluster in a member 1, that's fine, go ahead. If you like to start this configuration of this failover server from the member 2, that's fine, because whichever server you configure, since we have already decided, okay, to configure the failover cluster, both are going to be a member. So it doesn't make any difference whichever server you use to configure, it will be replicated automatically. Okay, so I'm going to start from member 1. Okay, so let's go in a hierarchy also as per the number also. Now I'm going to go to add a role. Okay, it is done, it's showing us now. So we'll close this, we don't need now. Okay, we have done, we have seen that. Okay, we did twice. Okay, no problem. We are going to close it. See, volumes are here, there's nothing to worry. Now we are going to add a role here. Okay, and that's a failover cluster. And don't forget, in both the servers, the failover cluster role has to be installed, and only the configuration part is done from the one server. So let it come over here. By the time we'll go to 2 also, just to install. Okay, but the configuration will be done only from the one server, and that we're going to use by default as your member 1. Okay, I'm going to add role over here also. By the time I guess member 1, it has already come. Okay, server manager is loading over here. Let it come. So by the time we'll install this failover cluster in your member 2. So let's go to next. Okay, this is the server, we already know that. And the same thing has to be done in the next server also. Of course, it's a feature. Failover cluster. Okay, failover cluster is here. Okay, add it. Let's go it. Whatever dependencies are there, it's gonna add it automatically for us. Okay, now let's go to member 1, because we'll have to do the same work over here as well. Okay, this is member 2. Don't worry, it's installing. I need to go to member 1. It's here. It's loading. It's a dashboard that we call a initial configuration test. So that's why it takes time, don't worry. I'm gonna okay, it's still loading. We'll be adding the feature over here as well. So by the time, let's go to member 1 and check it how much is been installed. And obviously it's gonna take time. It's gonna take time, don't worry. Member 2, let's go to member 1. Are we ready to set? Okay, congrats, it's coming over here. Let's start. We are simply adding the feature of failover cluster. Don't forget, we have not started the configuration. Okay, configuration will be done later. Since we are adding in both the servers at the same time, so it might be using the the RAM and the processor from the my main server. That means my main host only. So that's why it's taking time. No worries for that. Let's go to member 2. Okay, it's installing. So see, now this feature has to be installed in both the member server. So if it takes time, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to bring it back, because I don't want to make this video too lengthy, because I'm sure this video is going to be minimum 40 to 50 minutes, because you are going to see how the failover cluster is configured from 0 to 100. Okay, so that's why. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to install it. Okay, so once the installation is done, that means only the feature installation of failover cluster is done in both the member server, then I'll continue this video. Okay, by the time it has already come, so let's select it. No problem, it's a failover cluster. Okay, add a feature. And as I said, if it takes a long time, I'm gonna pause it and I'm gonna come back, because see, as I told you, this video is going to be long. So guys, sit back and watch this. I'm gonna pause this video and we'll meet after the failover cluster feature is been installed in both the member server. Okay, now finally the failover cluster feature is been installed in both the servers. As you can see over here, it's asking you to restart it. Okay, so we are going to close it and let's check it in another member server also. That means that is a member server 1, and I do believe there also installation is already done. This one is DC and we don't need this. Because see, the work of DC is just to go for your Iscsi target, nothing else. Okay, now rest of the works are done only by your failover cluster member. Now let's see in your member 1 as well, okay, whether that feature is being successfully installed or not. And I do believe it is already installed, so let's log in. It was installed long back, I guess. Okay, sorry. Okay, now so we're going to log in and we're going to see that in see it is already done. So now let's try to configure this failover cluster without restarting. Okay, that means we are not going to obey the rule or the information that has been displayed over here. So let's try that, okay, whether it accepts or not. I just want to show you. Okay, now let's go to tools. Now we will start the failover cluster configuration. Okay, now if I see over here failover cluster, it's not displayed. So let's check in member 2 also. This is member 2. So let's try to make sure that it allows us to configure or not. See, there is no failover cluster. If I go over here, it's asking for the domain controller so far I remember. Now that means the restart is mandatory. I just wanted to show you that without restarting, the failover cluster configuration is not possible. Why did I show you this? Just because after installing the failover cluster feature, you might be searching over here, or you might be thinking that failover cluster feature that was installed right now, it is not installed properly. So you might be finding some solution to install it properly. But trust me guys, this is already installed. Now you need to restart it. Okay, so let's restart both the server. This is member 2 and I'm going to restart the member 1 as well. Okay, so let's restart the member 1 as well. Okay, let's restart via this command. Now by the time both the members they are going to restart, okay, now we are going to see further, okay, by that dependencies or the prerequisite of that server in order to install the failover cluster. Okay, by the time it restarts, so let it restart both the server. I guess it's been restarting. See, start anyway. Okay, it's restarting over here. Now let's see the another member also, member 2 as well. Now restarting. So it is restarting, so that's why it's doing that. Okay, now the next thing what we need to understand, we need to make sure that both the member server, the Iscsi Initiator is being initialized. I just want to see that, I just wanted to show you over here that the information regarding them is also displayed in your Iscsi target. This is my server where the Iscsi target was installed in a domain controller. Now if you see over here in Iscsi, see, initiators are actually connected. But right now we have restarted, so that's why it's showing that. See, not connected, not connected, because both the members are restarted over here. See, it's restarting now. Okay, now again it shows, see, it's taking a time to restart this server after installing the feature of your failover cluster. So I'm going to do the same thing. That means I'm going to pause the video and we'll meet after both the Iscsi, that means I'm going to say the failover cluster member gets restarted. हुन्छ अब एकछिन यो पज नै गर्छु म. Okay, now both the member, the failover cluster feature has been installed successfully and they are restarted. As you can see, we are in a member 2. Okay, member 1, I guess it's starting. Okay, no problem, it is restarting, but in a member 2 it is already done, so we can configure our failover cluster from the member 2 as well. So let's go to the server manager and we are going to see in the tools, so there should be listed our failover cluster. Okay, without any error. See, failover cluster manager is already listed over here. So this is the first time that you are going through for the console of your failover cluster. So let it come. So it takes time, it might take few more seconds in my case. Okay, so then, okay, this is your console for your failover cluster. Now if you notice at the left hand side, failover cluster manager is there, but there is nothing. So if you see the clusters, nothing, status, nothing, node, status, nothing, because none of the members are being added as a part of the failover cluster. Now first thing that we need to do over here is create a cluster. Now while creating a cluster, you need to make sure that you select the correct server. That means both the member server who are going to be a part of this failover cluster need to be added over here. Now if you have not logged in via administrative privilege, trust me guys, you will not be allowed to do that. So I'm going to select both the members over here, that means cluster member 1 and member 2. These are the two servers who are going to be listed or work as a partner in our failover cluster. So both the computer's name or the server name has to be listed over here. See, 1 and 2 both are listed. Next. Now it's asking you, when I click next, run configuration validation test. Trust me guys, without going through the validation test, you will not be able to configure this failover cluster. So that's why obviously I'm going to select it yes, and we'll go to next. Okay, next. We're going to run all the tests over here. Okay, we'll have to run all the tests. Okay, we're going to run all the tests in order to make sure that it can be configured your failover cluster. So in between, if it shows any error, okay, any warning, we'll have to go through all of this and make sure that we install all the dependencies, all the prerequisite in order to configure this failover cluster. So if you notice over here, the failover cluster is being configured by your member server 2. Okay, the configuration is to be done only from the one server, not from the both the servers. So over here now, if I go to the my next member, it's still starting. Okay, it's starting. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it as it is because I'm going to configure from the member 2 only. So the configuration is to be done only from the one server. Okay, and both the servers, the member is already added. So over here, if we find any error, we'll have to come, pass through that. So far there is no error. Okay, disk space, it's validating. Okay, no problem. Disk failure pending, validate. It's going through all the routine setup. It's going to do that. So by the time it installs, I do believe that as we discussed, it's going to be the long video. So let it install fully. So we'll meet back after all of this validation test is done successfully. Okay, so let it go full. When it completes this validation test successfully 100%, then I'm gonna continue this video. By the time I'm gonna pause it and we'll meet after this validation test is done. the test has been done successfully. So if you want to go through it, if you want to view the report, you can simply click and view the report. So let's try to figure it out or find it out if there is any serious warning for us, so that might not create any issues in our configuration. So there is a warning in IP this configuration, but so far we know entire things are set properly, and we tested via ping also. So finally the test is done. Now finish. So you might be thinking the test is done, our work is over. No, now your work will start. After this, it's asking you the cluster name. Okay, as I told you, now we'll have to assign the IP for the cluster. So I'm going to give a name for my cluster. Let's say via take cluster, okay, without any space. Now you might be wondering why two IPs are listed over here. This is not our concern. Our concern is only the network of 50, because see, in the network of 50 range, we are going to create one IP, okay, for your cluster. So this cluster IP has to be set over here. So I'm going to give it 100, okay. So this one we don't need actually right now. Only one IP is needed for the cluster IP. This IP is mandatory, okay. Click next. Let it go now. That was a cluster IP, okay. So it's confirming. So let's go to next. Still it's not over yet. We have far to go still. It's creating a cluster, new cluster that we created just now. So it's verifying entire thing in order to create the failover cluster. We are almost reached to the final. Then we'll be creating a save folder, and I would like to show you how this cluster console looks like. It's almost done. It's forming a cluster. It shouldn't take much. It's making sure that both the disks are okay, and it's successfully running. So it is almost done. Let's not pause this time because it's almost done. Core cluster group to come online. It's waiting for that. Disk majority quorum, this configuration with cluster disk 1. Okay, now it's done. If I click finish, you'll see the console for your cluster. Now if you notice at the left hand side, previously we had only the name listed as a failover cluster manager, but now it's going to give you the arrow also in order to show the node and the cluster. Okay, it's attempting to connect to the Viatech cluster which we created just now. And I was saying at last time that there is one more IP we are going to set it, that is for the save folder. Okay, let it configure full. Now you'll notice over here, see, Viatech cluster, viatech.com is now created. This is the name of your cluster actually, through which you can access your resources. Okay, now let it open. You'll be having menu over here at the left hand side. It's loading, so wait for a few more seconds. Okay, almost done. Expand it. Okay, now if you notice over here, we have some error. Okay, it's a minor. Now if it gives any issue, then we are going to solve it, otherwise we're going to leave it as it is. Now if I go to the role, there is no role. Remember, we are going to use one role in order to use the service of our failover cluster. That's a file server role. Okay, but in both the member server, the file server role is being installed. Okay, now the nodes. Okay, now remember, both the this failover cluster partners were added, so that's why both the nodes are on. If I access anything right now, it's not going to show it anything. So I'm going to add the role. Okay, that role would be your failover cluster role. Now see over here, that means the file server role. Configure role. After configuring, I mean to say, after configuring the role only, you will be able to share your resource. So that means in the terms of your file server. So it's going to make a list of all the role that's been installed in your this server. See, it's a namespace server. You can use the failover cluster for all of this. It might be your namespace server, might be your DHCP server, and I have already made so many videos for this DFS namespace. It's failover, DHCP, or if you'd like to, use a failover cluster for any of this, I suggest you to go through my previous video. So right now we are going to use a simple, easy going, a file server. Okay, we are going to use the failover cluster for the file server. Okay, the required role or feature file server service could not be found. Okay, that means the file server is searching over here the role. So let's try to install it over here. Let's go to server manager. Okay, let's go to manage, add role, because the file server role has to be installed over here. Now let's go it next, and it has to be installed in both the member servers. Okay, okay, we are going to configure this one in member 2. Okay, so let's select member 2 because both are listed over here because they are a part of your failover cluster. So now file server, okay, file service, see, file server role is not installed, so that's why it's asking you to select that. Okay, I'm going to select it. Next, install. This is a role that is being installed in member 2, and you need to do the same thing in your member 1 as well. Okay, so we are going to add it, this role, in a member 1 server as well, because they are going to be a part of the cluster. So in both the server, that role has to be installed. Okay, so we are going to add it over here as well, the file server role. Normally in every server we used to install this file server for sharing any kind of these resources in order to manage, but over here, since it's a new installation operating system, that's why file server role was not added. Okay, so let's see in the file server 2 installation is completed or not. Okay, it's installing, no worries. Now we are going to the next member where we are supposed to install this. Okay, so we are going to add a file server role in your member 1 as well. This is the role on which we are going to configure the failover cluster. So that's why this role has to be installed. Okay, then we'll be sharing any kind of your files or folder, and we'll see via your failover cluster. And we'll also see practically when the one server goes down, via another server, the client will be able to access all of those resources without interrupting their service. So let it load this initial configuration test. By the time, it won't allow you to add any of the roles. Okay, let's add the role. If it is set, it's going to give you, okay, we are going to add a role, simple, for the failover cluster, and we'll be adding only file server role over here. So file server role, in order to host your failover cluster, install. So that's it. Okay, in both the member server, you'll have to install it. Okay, I should have pre-configured, but I forgot to do that. It's good on this, because you come to know that in order to deploy or use this failover cluster for the file server, even the file server role also has to be installed. In some of the server, you might find that some other guys, they might have pre-installed. So during the configuration of this failover cluster, you might be thinking, some sort of this misunderstanding that failover, I mean to say, the file server role is pre-configured by this Microsoft operating system, which is in fact not. You'll have to install it. By default, it's not going to bring it. Okay, so that's why it was not shown in both the servers. So let's see in both the server. Okay, this one is initiating just now. Initialization is done over here. That means it should be done soon. So let's wait for a few more seconds. Okay, successfully done. Okay, now the same thing has to be completed in your next member also. Okay, so let's try to configure. Of course, we are doing this configuration via member 2. So if I go to tools and my file server, that means the failover cluster manager, now we'll try to configure, okay, the role for the file server. And don't forget, in both the member server, that has to be installed, otherwise it's not going to work. By the time it's installing in our next member, let's try to configure this one. Okay, so let it come. It has already opened. Actually, the console is over here, so let it come full. we open so many, so that's why it's taking time. Okay, let's expand it. Go to the roles, okay, configure the role, and we're gonna select the file server role for the failover cluster practical implementation. Now let's select the file server role. By the time, let's test in your member one also. Okay, it is almost done. That might be the one cause it's taking enough time. Okay, so many, this cluster is open over here. Let's close that. Okay, file server. Next, now file server for general use. Obviously we're going to use for the general use. This is the IP I was talking about. Okay, for the file server from your failover cluster, you will have to have another one separate IP. If you remember, we have discussed about it in our first tutorial video. So let's give our final name over here. Okay, type the name that clients will use when accessing this clustered role. Okay, so we are going to write final file. Okay, now the IP for this file server, we'll have to add it over here. Okay, so let's give it 200. Okay, final file. Okay, next, this is the name actually used to access it. It's configuring now. So both the nodes are going to be a member for this one, so I need to select both. Okay, and then next. Okay, next. See, it's configuring high availability. That means for both the server, it has to be configured. You don't have to do this setting in your next server. See, your network name is final file and the IP address is this. Okay, see, now role is being added, final file. Okay, but till now there is nothing added. No server, no file or folders are being shared so far. Okay, so if you want to test this one, let's test it from your domain controller itself. Okay, let's go to the DC and try to access that. Okay, if I go over here to run, let's say file server, let's see the name what we gave just now. Okay, that means final file, of course, final file. So let's do that name, final file. Okay, there is no name, something like that. Let's say final file. See, there's nothing because we have not added any resource. That means no material, no files, no folder. The sharing is not done so far. Only the final file, your name for the cluster file, cluster shared folder is shown over here. It's empty. Now what we need to do after that, let's go to the same server where we were doing this configuration. Okay, I would like to show you again, your role is configured successfully and both the nodes are up and running successfully. Okay, now I'm going to add a file to share so that any of your client can access it easily. Okay, now we're going to share and of course we're going to make it SMB share. Okay, it shouldn't take long. Okay, see, sir, we are going to make it SMB share quick. Okay, this is the last step actually. After that we'll see, we'll try to make one server down and still the client will find the resource from the other server. That was the concept of your failover cluster. That means the high availability. Okay, now we are going to create one path for sharing that resource. Okay, let's take it any folder or file. Okay, now of course this is F, and we'll create one folder. Let's say test folder. Okay, now we'll select this one. Of course it is going to list over here test folder. Next, and we'll give the same name over here because we're in a testing environment. Okay, just next. Now this environment over here is for customizing your permission. So whatever permission you would like to give for your shared folder via your failover cluster, you will have to edit it over here. But right now we're in the lab environment. I'm going to click it simply next. Okay, create. Now it's been created. Successfully done. Congratulations. Now if I go to any of the client, let's go to the domain as well. Okay, now if I refresh it over here, okay, that folder is listed over here. Okay, and most probably we have given the full permission. It's done. If you go to your failover cluster, okay, your failover cluster is successfully configured. But one more thing that you need to make sure that both the nodes are on now. Okay, and as I told you last time, only one node, your logical volume, your partition will be visible. Another one will be passive. Both are not going to be active. So if I go see, configuration was done from the member 2. So that's why it should show you over here. Your disk is visible over here. But if I go to member 1, trust me, the disk will not be visible. Because one is active, one is passive. Okay, so let's see over here, the disk should be visible. See, congratulations, it is there. But if I go to the member, the next member of your member 1 over here, okay, member here, and okay, it is already done. So if I go to my computer, okay, and I try to see the disk, it is listed over there or not, because that disk is also a part of your failover cluster. And you'll notice it is not displayed over there. See, why? This is passive. Okay, this is not active at this time. Now, if I make this server to go down, okay, let's say something horribly went wrong, okay, and your server is down. So let's see now, I'm gonna log off, not log off, I'm gonna shut down only, okay, I'm gonna shut down my server 2, that means member 2, that is the failover cluster. Now what's gonna happen? Immediately your member 1 will be active. Okay, now as you can see over here that 2 nodes are up. Okay, now that means both the nodes are working hand in hand. That means when the one node goes down, another node will work immediately. Okay, and after that we have created the share over here. Okay, after we created the share, whatever sharings were done, okay, for this failover cluster file server role, those folders will get listed automatically when the clients are going to access it. So let's try it from here. Once again, in your domain, see, the file is already listed here. So if I close it, okay, and I go to UNC, of course we are going to access via SMB. Now see, final file was the name of our failover cluster file server role. See, it's listed over here. Now whatever contents are being added over here, it's going to list automatically when your client access it. So this way, any environment you can easily configure your failover cluster. Okay, now we have seen, I do understand this video went a bit lengthy because the topic was only just like that. So you can see that failover cluster is done successfully. Okay, and both the servers are listed over here as a node. So when the one node goes down, another node will wake up immediately. So if you find this was easy going, it was fruitful, and it is going to help you in order to continue your day-to-day activities as your system administrator. So please do like and subscribe. Thank you.